Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, but there's no actual coffee. Each episode, we interviewed an expert in the field of law enforcement analysis to share their career-defining stories and to get their insights on the world. Please join us on recognizing and learning from these brilliant minds as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 22 years of law enforcement analysis experience, with 30 years of law enforcement experience overall. That includes stops with the Canada Border Services Agency and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. She is a former president of IALEIA and serves on its executive advisory board. She is currently an adjunct professor and runs a consulting company called JJ Analytics. Please welcome Jenny Urquhart. Jenny, how are we doing?
Oh, really good, Jason. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of your very awesome podcast.
Oh, very good. Thank you for the kind words. First off, I didn't ask you in the prep call. Do you go by Jenny, Jennifer, Jen?
Well, I'll answer to any of those.
Okay.
I'm named after my mother. So sometimes, if I'm trying to act like a grown-up, I'll use Jennifer, but Jenny is fine as well.
Okay, very good. So Jenny, let's start with how you discovered the law enforcement analysis profession.
Sure. I started off as a summer student with Canada Customs. To be quite honest with you, most of my family is involved in public safety. So, maybe a little bit of nepotism because I also had two sisters working with Customs time. But I decided that, hey, the full-time money coming in was, a little bit more fun than being a poor student. So I decided to take a full-time job with Customs. And, I was working at the airport as a customs officer, checking bags and interviewing people. And then this poster came up for this brand new position of an intelligence analyst. And I read the poster and I thought, wow, that sounds really cool. I'm just going to throw my name in the hat because, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Well, about 250 other people in the province of British Columbia also decided to throw their name in the hat, and we all came together and wrote an exam. And I was one of the lucky people that passed the exam. About 10 of us were lucky enough to pass. I went for an interview. 5 people out of that 10 were offered a position as the first cadre of intelligence analysts for British Columbia, for the Pacific region of Canada Customs. So I was young. I was only 23 years old. And when we went for training in Rigaud, Quebec, which is our training center for Canada Customs, I was the youngest. I was the youngest analyst by probably 15 years.
Oh,
if
wow.
Not, maybe a little bit more. So that's where I started, and I have loved the job every day since.
So what did you pick up when you were working with Customs as a custom inspector that helped you become an analyst?
Yeah, we actually learned quite a few structured analytical techniques, but we didn't actually know that's what they were at the time. So we spent a lot of time learning about indicators, a lot of time, looking at various pieces of information and putting that story together to make a claim that we believed this person was smuggling. So I learned to look at a lot of pieces of information in a really short amount of time, because these people are standing in front of you. So you have to, be quick at how you're assessing the situation. But, I also learned things like how to deal with people, how to talk to people and get information. That was a big thing. But I think one of the biggest things I learned, and I'm not sure if I use it so much in analysis as I do with dealing with people, but we spent a lot of time talking about body language. And so I was, very good at sort of interpreting if people were accepting of what I had to say or maybe not accepting. But that was a great, great job also. And I had a lot of fun and learned a lot doing that job.
Along with those lines and getting into becoming an analyst, and you mentioned that you were the youngest by 15 years. So how did that play out in terms of you being the youngest and how you were treated and whatnot?
Yeah. I wish I could say, oh, it was, all easy and I didn't have any challenges, but I certainly did. Being female was also part of it. I wish it wasn't, but it was. But I think that sometimes I was dismissed because it was felt that perhaps maybe I didn't have enough life experience, make statements I was saying or to be confident in my conclusions and recommendations. But you have to work hard to build your reputation and to be taken seriously. I don't think that's changed. I think that's probably the same everywhere, but it took a bit of time before people realized that I did have something to say. And it came from, even though I had a short life compared to some of them, I had a full life. I had traveled all over the world for a year. I come from a family of 8 children. I've had a lot of experience. And so I think after a while, they sort of, learned to take what I said seriously.
You had mentioned that this is a program that just started. You were the first 5. As you look back at that training, do you think it was a good training? Was there stuff missing, or how did it prepare you to be an analyst?
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, considering that was so many years ago, and now I have the hindsight to really evaluate that training. I'm going to tell you, Jason, it was really good.
Good.
It was 3 weeks. It was full on developing products. We were encouraged to give conclusions and recommendations, which in Canada we are with every agency. So that's always a big plus. But we learned about strategic intelligence at the same time, because we do a lot of that in Canada as well. So looking back on it now, I don't think I could have asked for any better training. We learned how to create charts and timelines and other products that we would use. And I actually was looking through some old material the other day that I found from that training. And I was like, that still would be useful today.
And then what kind of cases are you working on at this time, or what are some tasks that you're responsible for?
With Canada Customs?
Yes.
So generally, I worked on sort of 2 kinds of cases. One of them had to do with, funnily enough, reclassifying the tariff on cooking wine. And the reason is because we had a large population of drug addicts and alcoholics in our downtown east side. And what they were doing is buying this Chinese cooking wine in the corner stores. So we needed to reclassify that so that you could only buy it in a government-run liquor store. So I wrote a project on how it was easy to get, the implications it was having on society, and why we needed to reclassify it. And that project actually did result in that commodity being reclassified. But what we were also looking at too was obviously cross-border movement of drugs. At that time, what was happening is, cocaine and guns coming north, and marijuana, BC bud, as we referred to it, going south. So a lot of work on identifying organized crime groups that operated across the border, and trying to have some success on working them and putting them in jail.
Back to the cooking wine. So were they just drinking it straight up, or were they making some kind of cocktail out of it?
No, Jason, they're drinking it straight up. And I don't know if you've ever tasted Chinese cooking wine, but it's kind of just a step away from mouthwash.
Oh man, that was, because I would think it would not taste very well. It's straight. So that's why I was wondering, maybe they're mixing it with something.
No, they were going to the corner store, buying it and drinking it on their way to the park.
Oh man, and you took all their fun away by, forcing them to buy it in a state liquor store.
Exactly. But, I felt kind of proud of that, that, when you write something and it actually has an effect on legislation, or,
sure,
it was a good feeling.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's interesting. What else happened during your time here as an analyst with Border Services?
Well, what we did, and it was very actually proud of this, is this pre 9/11, because what we were learning, well, we knew that the cross-border issue was big, but we also knew as analysts that we didn't really have a good mechanism for sharing intelligence across the border with our counterparts in Border Patrol and U.S. Customs, as it was at that time. So a couple of us went to our bosses and said, hey, we really think, can we go across the border and talk to them? Can we see what kind of intel they have that we might be able to use? And we did. What evolved from there is a group of analysts from the RCMP, Canada Customs, US Customs, and US Border Patrol sharing the intelligence that we had about these cross-border operating groups. We called ourselves CBAT, Cross-Border Analysis Team. It's kind of sad in a way that we had to, make this happen, that we had to request that we rewrite our MOUs, our ways of sharing information, because they didn't really exist before then. So we were able to do that, and that CBAT then sort of became the model that we refer to now as IBIT, which is Integrated Border Intelligence Teams. And they operate all along the border, the northern border between US and Canada at several different locations. So that was kind of cool to be a part of that as well.
In the beginning, how many agencies were part of that?
Just 4.
Okay.
RCMP, US, and Canada Customs, because the RCMP has jurisdiction of the border between the ports of entry. Canada Customs has jurisdiction at the ports of entry. Much like it was on the US side. Border Patrol had that area between, and then US Customs was at the ports.
Yeah. So this is a bunch of analysts getting together and talking about their issues, right?
Yeah, talking about cases, sharing intel, trying to, make connections between these groups.
All right. Now, did you feel that the connection that you had, you guys did a better job of communicating than as opposed to maybe the higher ups communicating with one another across the border?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a story you hear a million times on podcasts, but yeah, absolutely. We were like, come on, we're doing it fine here. If the bosses only knew how we were doing it, they're either going to be really upset or really happy, one of the two. But yeah, we didn't have any trouble sharing intelligence and making our cases able to go to prosecution for sure. It took a little bit of buy-in from the uppers because it was a bit scary for them, I think, but they did come around.
So then you move on to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in 2001. So why did you make that transition?
Actually, just before that, I was working on a joint task force with the RCMP, and that task force was focusing on tobacco smuggling, which was a huge issue at that time because of lack of taxes or huge taxes, which increased the need for having a black market for cigarettes. But so I was working at a joint task force with the Border Integrity Unit of the RCMP. And at that time, the RCMP was just sort of joining the bandwagon for having analysts. Customs was actually a bit ahead of them there. And so they had a bunch of money and they went out and started to look for analysts, and they actually headhunted me and gave me, let's just say, a package that I would have been foolish to have given up. So
Okay.
I
Offer you can't refuse, right?
I took that package. Exactly. An offer I couldn't refuse, including more holidays and, a seamless transition of my pension from one federal department to another. I wanted the opportunity to work on those kinds of crimes. The RCMP being our federal policing agency, and in some cases our provincial agency, and in other cases our municipal policing agency. I wanted to work on a bit more tactical gang stuff. So that's another reason why I went.
Now, did you feel it was like starting all over again, that you had to earn your reputation? Or by this time, you had enough experience under your belt, enough confidence to go in there and help right away and didn't have to deal with trying to convince anybody that you belonged?
Yeah, a good question. A little bit of both, I would say. For those people that I had been working with closely, they were very happy to use the services of an analyst. And, I was never looking for work, that type of thing. But as I started to go to some of the other units, the gang units, outlaw motorcycle gang, sometimes it took a bit more, how can I say, encouraging of the older police officers who didn't have any experience working with analysts before. They didn't know how to task me. They didn't know what I could do. And so, there's a lot of education on my part of being very proactive and self-directed and providing products that I knew they could use without waiting for them to ask me.
All right. Well, let's get into your badge stories then. It's story time. So the analyst badge story, for those that may be new to the show, this is the career-defining moment, case, project that an analyst worked on. For you, you have a couple of stories for us today, right?
I do. Just, as a bit of a caveat, being Canadian and having been retired from the RCMP, as I'm sure you all know, our privacy laws in Canada are a little bit more restrictive than yours in the United States. So I have two stories because they're probably a little bit more redacted than maybe some of your other guests. So I thought to make sure I can fill the time, I have two.
Okay,
So
great.
my first one was going back to sort of when I first started to work for the RCMP exclusively. I was assigned to a unit that was working on a pornography file. And we knew that we had an organization, a group of people involved in the production of and the distribution of pornography in the Vancouver area. And so we started to, do an investigation, and the team was pretty good at having me be at the meetings and the briefings, but they still didn't know what to do with me. So, we're getting this information, and obviously we're trying to move it forward so that we can take this package to our prosecutors and lay charges. Well, we weren't having a lot of luck. So we had to, of course, make our application to do what we call in Canada a Part 6. In the US, you would call it a wiretap, to get telephone information. And so, I said to the team, yes, I can help you with this, no problem. So the records start coming in, and I'm doing my telephone toll analysis, as we used to call it, our communications analysis now. And I see a number that's coming up quite regularly, but I don't have a subscriber attached to it at the moment. Make some inquiries, and I determined that it's the number to a storage locker, which is actually not too far from where one of our main targets lives. So I bring this to the next meeting with the investigators, and I'm identifying that, I think this is significant and important. I'm going to be honest with you, it probably took me about a week of harping about this to the day where the surveillance team didn't have a lot to do. So they decided that they would go and talk to the owners of this storage. So they talked to the manager, got some information about who rented it. They went in and did a secret search of that locker and were able to locate just boxes and boxes and boxes of CDs and of pornography. So we were able to find out where they were holding this product, because up until that point, we didn't know where it was. So that, I felt really good, and the team was excited that I was able to give them a product. And then they went around the office touting the success of working with an analyst. And well, then what happens after that? Then we're so busy, we can hardly breathe or go for coffee, because everybody wants a chart done and everybody wants help with their case. So it's
I'll do it again, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. So no, and I always point out too that just start with one success and then it snowballs from there. But there's also opportunities where you step up, and if you strike out, that's going to be detrimental as well. Just keep that in mind for the listener. Sometimes you're going to strike out, and that's going to have a residual effect as well.
Yeah, this is not a job for the faint of heart. You have to be willing to make statements with levels of confidence and knowing that we may not be right. We don't have all the information. If we did, they wouldn't be using us.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
And then what's your other story?
My other story has to do with a case. It is much later on in my career. It was actually just shortly before I left the RCMP. I was working in our human trafficking unit. I was working with a team, and we had a case of a young girl who had been given a story that she was going to be coming from a country in Africa to Canada to work in a hair salon owned by this family. That wasn't the case. She arrived in Vancouver, and she basically became their slave, and they took her passport and her documents, and they provided her with a maid's uniform, and she worked 18 to 20 hours a day. Not what she signed up for. She started talking to people about her situation, and this came to the RCMP, and an investigation was started. Anyway, we have to corroborate some of the information that she's telling us. We're putting this case together. And during one of our meeting roundtables, it comes up that she did provide some information, but to corroborate this information, we were going to have to contact somebody in Liberia, country in Africa. And, everybody was lamenting like, oh, there's no way, well, I guess we're going to move on to the next item because this is never going to happen. And I, felt confident, and I put my hand up and I said, I'd like to take a stab at this. I think I might be able to help here. And my boss is like, what are you going to do? Like, you have a contact there? And I said, well, actually, I think I might. So I had a contact from my time in IALEIA who I knew was very involved with intelligence services in Africa through her training and her studies. So luckily, the time change was on our side, and I sent her an email out, with the information outlining what I was looking for intelligence purposes only. This wasn't going to be going to court or becoming evidence. And, within 90 minutes, she was able to identify a person who could help us and get us the answer that we were looking for, allowing us to corroborate this information from our victim. So I walked into my boss's office. Again, it was about 90 minutes, maybe a couple hours later, and I handed him a piece of paper that I had printed, and I said, yeah, I got the answer. And I got to tell you, if he wasn't sitting down, I think he would have fallen down. He was so shocked. He was like, how did you do this? And I said, I contacted a contact of mine through IALEIA and explained the situation. I know her. We've been friends for a long time. She reached out to a contact of hers, and they were able to get back to us. He was, again, just completely shocked. He had a supervisor's meeting that he needed to attend in a few minutes. So he took that information, walked into that supervisor's meeting, was able to give everybody an update on how our file was moving, including my ability to use my networks to answer this question. And it wasn't about me getting the accolades, but I certainly made him look good. And he now was, the rock star of the team, and he did pay it. He came back and was very thankful and good job. But of course, like you just mentioned, what happens after that is anybody that's looking for any sort of contact internationally, I was their first stop. And I was happy to help them and use my IALEIA network to help wherever I could. But, it's an example of, again, it's the relationships you make, it's the network that you keep, and it's, using what you have to get the job done. And I'm proud of that example as well.
Yes. So what year was this?
2013 or 2014.
Okay. And did the woman speak English, or was there an interpreter there? How was she able to communicate?
No, she spoke English to a varying degree. But that wasn't the biggest hurdle. But that case actually did end up with a successful prosecution. And in Canada, we up until that point didn't have a lot of human trafficking cases of that kind that we had successful prosecutions with. So it was a big deal for us.
Yeah, I just had Shelagh on the show a couple weeks ago. She talked about the language barrier, and she's doing a lot of work with human trafficking right now.
It can be, but luckily for us in the RCMP, being such a huge federal agency, we have a lot of members and analysts and people that work that have other languages. So that was probably less of a challenge than it might have been for a smaller agency.
And you left it off your list of badge stories, but would you mind telling the story regarding the information you were able to produce right after 9/11?
Sure, absolutely. So that CBAT unit that I was talking about, where, we were hands across the border, as it was, sharing intelligence and working on cross-border crime groups. We were working before 9/11. Being on the Pacific coast, of course, when I woke up and was getting ready to go to work, things had already happened in New York and on the East Coast. So, you have that cup of coffee in your hand and you're watching the TV and complete stunned, everybody remembers that day and what it meant to them. But I thought, okay, I got to get to work. I have to find out what it is I can do to help here. I was supposed to be going across the border that day to our office in Bellingham, Washington, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I went to my regular office, and all of the police officers in my office had already been or were in the process of being dispatched to Vancouver International Airport because all of the planes were being redirected and were landing there. So there weren't many of us in the office, and we're kind of walking around like zombies as it was. But I'm at my desk and I'm reading, all the things that are coming in. And the first message was how our RCMP had set up our NOC, our National Operations Center. And we were instructed, if we received any information or intelligence regarding the events of 9/11, to send them to this particular email address. And because I had this great relationship with my analyst colleagues in the United States, they were sending me whatever they were getting. It was just, we had an email group, and, so that's how we shared information, and that's how I was getting it. So I was following orders, instructions, and forwarding all of this information onto the NOC. Well, about 2:00 that afternoon, I get a phone call in my office, and I can see the number, and I can see its headquarters. And well, we all know nobody wants to see the headquarters number pop up on your telephone. So I very kind of tentatively picked it up and identified myself. There's a male on the other end, and he identifies himself as I think it was like a chief superintendent or something way higher than I am. And he sounds haggard and flustered. And he's like, who are you? And I identify myself again. He goes, no. I mean, where are you and why are you getting all of this information? And so I'm like, oh God, I'm going to be in trouble. And I explain, the CBAT thing, and this is who I am. And we've just been, my counterparts in the US have just been sending me everything that they have. And I've been forwarding it to you. And he's like, he goes, you know what? You're the only person that's been giving us any decent information. I don't really know who you are, but don't stop. Just keep it coming. Whatever you get, send it through. And I was like, yes, sir. Okay. So it was I was a little bit, afraid at first that maybe I was doing something wrong, but, they were just so grateful to have another kind of source of information. And so it was, again, another success of agencies sharing information with each other and not letting some of that bureaucracy get in the way sometimes.
You just never know when a connection's going to come in handy, right?
Absolutely.
So you eventually leave the mounted police and you start developing your own consulting company. What are you consulting on?
Everything to do with analysis. No, I went back to school in my 40s and finished my bachelor's degree, and I majored in adult education. I love to teach. I have always loved to teach. And it is, the second thing I would do if I'm not an analyst, and now I get to put them together. So what I normally do in my training company and in my consulting company is developing training that is geared towards whoever's asking for it. I think that sometimes one of the constraints that training programs have is they are sometimes too general, that it doesn't always give the customer something that is directly geared towards their needs or their desires or their issues or problems that they're dealing with. So I kind of pride myself on having good diagnostics with the customer and identifying what it is they want, and then creating a training package that will meet those needs. So that's basically what I've been doing for the last few years.
And then one of these projects that you're contracted with as a trainer deals with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, correct?
This is correct.
Okay. What specifically are you doing for them?
Sure. Actually, this is one of my most recent projects. I just finished the first part of that last week, as a matter of fact. So the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been given the task of overseeing what's called the PACFIG. That's the Pacific Fisheries Intelligence Group. And this is made up largely of countries in the Pacific Ocean or have a Pacific Ocean border who are struggling with IUU issues, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So and we know that's a huge issue. Anybody can see that on the news right now, or if you've seen the Netflix show that's on at the moment. So Canada is assisting in training analysts from these countries to help fight these types of crimes. How I became involved in this is my professional longtime mentor, Rob Volman, is also retired from the RCMP. He is on contract as a consultant with our DFO, and he's been helping them put together some training for them as well. He actually identified the FIAT program, the IALEIA FIAT program, as a training opportunity for these new analysts. However, as you know, the cases that are built are very much geared towards organized crime and, the type of things that these analysts aren't going to see or deal with. So they contracted me, and I'm rewriting 4 case studies that fit into the FIAT program, but they are all geared towards fisheries crimes. And it's not just the IUU stuff, but it's the human trafficking that gets involved. It's the drug smuggling, it's the corruption, the forged
Okay.
documents, all of this stuff. And so I'm creating 4 new case studies that will be applicable to their work environment.
Yeah, I can visualize that. You develop cases and then you get key indicators and stuff to look for. And that's what they're working on. Because with each one of those cases, it was for the Fiat program, it was a puzzle. And you got a little bit of information throughout the week. And so I can visualize that. That sounds like an interesting task.
It's been really fun because I've had to learn about a whole industry that I knew very little about. So I love to learn. It's kind of my favorite thing. So it's been a really great experience for me.
Have you taught this yet, or when's the first class?
No, because of COVID-19
Mm-hmm.
and because they want to do this training in person, they're not actually thinking it's probably not going to happen until 2022 at the earliest.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get into more with IALEIA and get your advice for the listeners, and then we'll finish up with some personal interests.
Perfect.
You're listening to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Kristen Lottman, and my public service announcement is to say, get your face out of your phone and your fingers off your keyboard and make that face-to-face contact, because that's how you'll connect with other people.
Hi, this is Shelagh Dorn. Do you want to build your credibility with field personnel, with police officers on the street? Get a candy dish, put it on your desk, and fill it with good candy. That's your opportunity to talk with people and engage. You can send out 1 million emails. People might know your name, but they don't really know you until you talk to them face to face. And that candy dish is an opportunity to talk with people and really get to know them.
Welcome back, Jenny. Now I want to start with getting into IALEIA. And I know you eventually become president, but I want to start with how you discovered and joined IALEIA.
Okie dokie. That's kind of a good story. So again, my professional mentor has been and still is Rob Vollman, and he's one of the founding members of IALEIA and one of our highest level serving civilian members in the RCMP. And he encouraged me to join IALEIA as a member, and I did. And shortly after that, a few of us in Vancouver area, we were encouraged to start a Western Canadian chapter. And I stepped in and I said, yeah, I'll be vice president of that. Let's get this rolling. And then 9/11 happens. I had already been granted permission to travel to the IALEIA conference and IALEIA LIU conference that was happening in Toronto just a few months after 9/11. So I am going as a new chapter member and, going to meet people and to talk about what we need to do here in Vancouver. So I go and I don't know anybody, and I'm standing outside of the hotel deciding where I should go for dinner, and out waltzes Richie Martinez and the board, Lisa Palmieri, Leo Jacques, Paul Zandrowski, the old cadre, shall we say. They recognize me, and Richie's like, hey, come for dinner with us. And I was like, oh, okay, totally nervous and starstruck. I'm not going to lie, completely starstruck. These are like the rock stars of Intel analysts right in front of me. So we'll go for dinner and, start chatting and doing my best. And, they all have known each other for years, but they were super gracious. And I got up, talking. And as the night goes on, so what comes out of that conversation is the Western Canadian chapter is going to host a conference in Vancouver, and that Richie Martinez is going to come to visit us in the next few months as we start ramping up. And we start to go on a little bit, and about, later on in the night, Richie says to me, and he goes, you know what? You're going to be president of IALEIA one day. And I laughed it off, and I said, well, thanks, Richie. I appreciate your confidence. That's wonderful. And wouldn't you know it, I think it was about 10, 11 years later, I'm standing up in the stage in Nashville accepting the nomination and the election results as the new president. So I tell you, that guy, he is a charmer, and he can certainly make things happen. And he saw something in me that day that I didn't actually see myself. And I'm very grateful for his confidence in my ability to be a part of the great organization.
Yeah, that's a great story. So as you look back during your time with IALEIA, even leading up to being president and then being president, I mean, I guess, what are you most proud of?
A couple of things. I held a position on the board as a Canadian representative. And what that really sort of highlighted for me is IALEIA begins with an I, and that I stands for international. And so I really took it personally as my job to remind everybody else on the board who's predominantly American that we represent a large population and percentage of analysts that are not in the United States. That doesn't mean that we, stop focusing on those issues, but we do create a ton of products that are applicable outside of the United States as well. Analytic standards is a really good one that I use everywhere in the world and advocate. So, I would often be the voice of, maybe the voice they didn't want to hear. It's like, hey, these decisions that we're making, I see where they're coming from, but they're a little bit ethnocentric US wise. Maybe we might want to word it like this, or maybe we might want to ask, this group of analysts if this is an issue, that type of thing. So I really did feel responsible to focus on that I during my time.
Why do you think there's not more international members to the association?
Well, I can tell you based on some of my discussions with my counterparts internationally is sometimes they feel that it is too US centric.
Mm-hmm.
I, obviously see both sides of that coin. I think part of it is, it's not that it's so US centric, it's just that we haven't always identified how to use all the things we've created and make it more attractive to international people. Again, even if we're talking about the analytic road book, the map for career development. Yes, it's geared mainly towards US analysts, but it is applicable to anybody. The ideas in there are universal. So maybe we need to, create a second version that is international in flavor. But yeah. I think that is, that seems to be sort of a theme that I hear often is many people from other countries think that it doesn't fully reflect their desires and needs.
Yeah. One of the things I think about of this topic is in the US, we have a lot of open source information. We have a lot of opportunities with training. Analysts are open to contacting other analysts to get information and to build a network. And I feel in some of the other countries, they don't have that luxury of having it be so open. And that's, I think, a roadblock for them to joining and being a part of the association. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can give a bit of context for that. So I currently do a lot of work with the Justice Education Society, which is a nonprofit out of Vancouver. And our focus is on Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and a little bit of Panama. I go in there and it's all about intel sharing and, you have to do this if we want to have successful prosecution at a higher level of these organized crime groups because they don't care about the borders. And you go on like that and you feel like this is the message. And then when you sit down and talk to these analysts and you realize, first of all, they are unlikely or unwilling to share information outside of their agency because they don't trust other people, because there has been a history of corruption and of misuse of information and all of these things. And it's not just, oh, my boss says I can't. It's they actually have cases and memories of where people have done that and it hasn't turned out very good. So how do you get over that? How do you say, well, I'm really sorry about that, but you should still share all your information. So it's a process. My partner and I have been in that area about 5 years now, and we still harp that message, but there's more to it. It's not as easy as we think. There are political issues and history and all sorts of other things that come into play. So yeah, you're right. There may not always be the willingness or the confidence in sharing information that we might have here in North America.
And then back to IALEIA, I got a couple more questions on IALEIA. The association turns 40 this year, which is remarkable when you look back. What are some things that come to mind as you think about the association turning 40?
Yeah, it's I'm super proud. I'm proud of its legacy, and I'm proud that it's even stronger today than it was. And I think that there's an excellent group of people on the board with a good strategic plan, and I see nothing but good things coming for the future. That's for sure. I think that the whole idea of hiring an executive director is excellent. And I know Sheila said it, but it's a term that we talk about often, is moving from that church model to the business model. True. When you're working or dealing with a nonprofit, I think sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around, but it's really the way to move from everybody being a volunteer to people being paid to produce certain parts of the things that we need as an association. So I'm proud to see them do that and move in that direction for sure.
And it's too bad, again, this for the second year in a row, the conference was canceled. What's some of your favorite parts of the conference?
I used to be on the conference planning committee for years. So working behind the scenes and negotiating contracts and, working out budgets for food and beverage and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I learned a whole skill set that, I probably would never have learned before. But some of the things about the conference that I think people underestimate is the ability to network. And we have those contact parties at, every day. It's not just to use up the money or whatever. It's to give people opportunities to meet people from other agencies or other parts of the country or the world, share best practices and build those relationships that, allow us to trust when we're going to share information, best practices or whatever, templates for reports, whatever it is that we want to share.
And I will just throw this out to the audience. I had mentioned this a couple weeks ago. IACA is having their conference at the end of August. And I think I was successful in suggesting that if you're an IALEIA member, you can get the IACA membership rate for the conference. I haven't quite confirmed that, but I know that was something that the IACA board was willing to do. So I'm hoping they will do that for you. But if you've never been to the IACA conference, this is probably a good year to try it, since the IALEIA conference is not happening this year. So I encourage you to give it a try and to compare and contrast the two conferences.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I'm not one or the other. I've been a member of both associations for probably 15 years. In Canada, we don't really have that huge delineation between the two, crime analysts and intel analysts. You're kind of a criminal analyst, and you may do both depending on where you are in your career or where you are geographically. So that's always been a little bit foreign for us here in Canada. Yeah, I think that IACA has got some great stuff going, and I've always been, had nothing but good things to say about that organization as well.
Yeah, it's only in America. Only in America do we have the difference between crime analysts and intelligence analysts. Anyhow, what other thing I wanted to talk to you about with IALEIA is I see that you are a lifetime criminal intelligence certified analyst.
Yes.
And what does that entail, and how did you get the lifetime part?
It's because I'm old, Jason.
No. Didn't want to ask that directly.
Yeah. Well, it's a certification program. I mean, you know that, but it entails study of material that is provided to you that is pertaining to our profession. And then there's an exam that's proctored and written and marked. And then that, based on your application and your years of service, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, in the profession, help determine what classification of certification you'll get. Because I had so many years when I wrote the exam and successfully wrote the exam, that allowed me to glean that title as a lifetime certified.
Okay, so is the test the same, or is the lifetime test different?
I think it's the same.
Okay, and it's just that your impact to the profession is what's taken into consideration for the lifetime portion. Okay.
Yeah, and it's, your experience and, have you led team, there's all sorts of stuff that comes into play.
I gotcha. Okay. Before we move on, was there anything else that you wanted to add about IALEIA?
You may not know, but I actually am coming back to the board this year. I ran for the position of communications director and successfully won that election. So I'm back on board July 1st.
All right. Well, very good. What are you hoping to do as communications director?
Oh, well, first of all, everything that they've been doing so far in terms of even types of communication and reach, I think they've done a really good job. So part of my metric will be sustaining how it's going so far. And then of course, exploring other ways of getting the message out there. And largely though, it's about identifying really good volunteers that want to be a part of writing newsletters and journals and keeping websites up to date and Twitter and social media platforms and things like that. So I will be in the next couple of weeks having some good meetings with the current communications director and kind of downloading everything that needs to be done and the best way to go about it. And then I'm going to start recruiting.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, let's go on to some advice that you have for our audience. One question I like to ask is, what do you suggest an analyst study today that'll be a good return on investment maybe 5 years from now?
Ooh. Two things I would say is that probably anything related to cybercrime is really going to be a big wave of the future. And I would also say focusing on SAT, structured analytic techniques, when to apply them, where to apply them, and which ones to use in a given circumstance. I think we underestimate that. At least we do. I've seen that in my career. I mean, I didn't even learn what a real SAT was until I was probably 2/3 into my career, and I wished I'd learned about them sooner. So any chance you can get to increase your toolbox with different methodologies, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Do you have an example of the SAT?
Well, I can say that in the RCMP in Canada, one of the ones that we use regularly is ACH, analysis of competing hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't come around right away. That's something that's sort of been adopted over the last few years. I think that's a great one. But there are like hundreds of them. I think key assumption check is a really good one right now, particularly when we are inundated with communication and information from all different sources, and we have biases and confirmation biases and the way we look at things. I think stopping for a minute and just keeping in check our assumptions about what we think is also a really good way to keep us on a level playing field.
When you look back at your career, and when you first started, you probably envisioned that there was an issue that would be solved by 2021. And what are you surprised that the law enforcement analysis profession hasn't figured out yet?
And I'm speaking in generalities here because this isn't the case everywhere that I know, but I still think we're struggling with that dichotomy between sworn members and civilian members in an agency. And still talking to people that's an issue. Sort of going along with that is the lack of a career path for civilian analysts. Meaning that how many levels can we move up? Is there the opportunity to actually be a supervisor and a manager overseeing other analysts? And does that manager, are they on the same level as other sworn members within their agency? So we still deal with that issue where the manager of an intel unit is a sworn member, they get promoted in, they have no intel experience. The people within that unit will educate them and keep them up to speed. And then when they've done their 2 years, they get promoted to a new unit and a new person comes in and it starts all over again. I was kind of hoping we'd be past that.
So then let's pretend that you were given the title of World Law Enforcement Analyst Leader and that you could come up with a solution for some of these issues. What would you like to see happen?
I'd like to see a clear, defined career path for those analysts that want it. Not everybody wants to be a boss, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of us that did, I wish that it was a bit more defined. I wish that our education requirements maybe included something that was specific to intelligence. There's lots of courses now that exist that didn't when I started. So, having a diploma in intel analysis is something that you can get now. Having experience with I2 or experience creating timelines and charts would be nice before I started the job. I think those are things that if I had the power, I would think about implementing.
Yeah. I would like to see, in terms of a management role, that it just doesn't turn into just a management role. And what I mean by that is it seems like in a lot of offices, and goes outside of law enforcement as well, if you get promoted to a manager, that means you're not doing any analytical work anymore. You're going to meeting after meeting after meeting, and you're just a project manager from there. I say just, I don't mean that in any derogatory way, but it seems like you're not leading per se, you are managing the team.
Yeah, I can see that. I can also see, the role being nothing but an advocate for the analysts that work under you, and that can also take you away from doing any of the actual analytical work.
Yeah, because you definitely should be able to have a leadership role in which you're still doing analysis. I mean, I understand the whole management stuff still needs to happen. There still needs to be a leader of the analyst. But it seems like once you get to even to that management position, it's just more administrative, and you're just there to make sure that the analyst work gets done and there's no more analysis for you.
Yeah, that's true. It'd be great to see somebody in that position have the ability to be like an analytical tradecraft advisor.
Mhm.
In addition to management, but be the place where the analysts in the unit would come in and say, hey, I'm thinking about, approaching this problem this way. What do you think?
Yeah.
Giving that kind of advice and feedback too would also be awesome.
What would you like to see happen in terms of the sworn versus civilian issue?
I think, more trust between the two, and less, kind of demystify things. I think that it might also be a generational thing. I think as the leaders within law enforcement, they're younger, or they were younger, and now that they're becoming the leaders, these leaders have experience working with analysts and working, having an analyst assigned to the team. So I'm hoping that this will begin to alleviate some of the distinction between the two.
I think I would like to see more of civilians leading roles that are just innately civilian. And what I mean by that is, I mean, the analyst unit, IT, those departments should be run by civilian because I think they're innately civilian. Certainly understand why sworn would be a head of patrol or investigations or intelligence. These are innately sworn tasks and departments. But when it comes to situations where you clearly look and the majority of the employees are civilians, it seems like then that should be led by civilians.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's getting better. I've heard and seen situations where that is getting better.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish up with personal interests. So you are how'd you put it? A reality TV junkie.
I know, it's a guilty pleasure.
So what is your favorite of all time?
Oh. Okay, I'm going to be so judged by this, but I'm going to go ahead anyway and be honest here. My current favorite is Naked and Afraid.
Yeah. For those that aren't aware of that show, give a description of what that is.
It's two people who have some survivalist training or experience, and they are dropped individually in the middle of nowhere. Then they must take all their clothes off and walk a short distance to meet their partner that they've never met. It's usually an opposite sex partner. They are each entitled to bring one survival implement, usually like a fire starter or a machete or a pot. And sometimes they'll be given one of those. And then they must survive completely on their own for 21 days, or sometimes depending if they change the theme of the show, but generally it's 21 days. They have to build their shelter, find their food, cook their food, make fire, survive rain, all that kind of stuff. And at first I have to think, I was like, why do they have to be naked? Like, it just seems so sensationalist. Like, why is this happening? But come to learn that it makes them so vulnerable and so, reliant, and you can't hide anything. And it's, I think it really has to do with how people interact with each other. And I think it would be different if they were clothed. So I find that whole social aspect of it super interesting. People that you didn't think on the surface would have the I don't know, the mental fortitude to make it, surprise me all the time. Then you have like the big, muscular guys that you think, oh, they're going to, be super good out there, where they're super hungry and starving by the third or fourth day and they don't always make it. And so I like the social aspect of it. And I'm really liking the whole idea of survival. Like, I think to myself, could I do it? If I had to be out there, could I make a fire? Could I kill an animal to eat it or catch a fish or any of that stuff? So that's my latest guilty pleasure.
So is the goal for them to eventually get together and become a couple?
No,
Okay.
not at all. There's very little of that, surprisingly. It's, about making a working partnership, identifying each other's strengths and weaknesses, and supporting each other mentally and through skills and hunting and whatever. So sometimes they don't like each other at all, but they know they want to finish the challenge, so they'll get past that. And sometimes they seem to be like lifelong friends.
Interesting. Is it a whole season of just the two people, or is just one episode dedicated to the two people?
There's a few models. Usually it's just like each season has, like, I don't know, 10 different episodes of 10 different pairs of people meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes they have, I can't even believe I know all this. It's even more embarrassing. But they have like, now they have like, it's called like Naked and Afraid XL. So they'll bring back contestants that people really liked or really hated, and they'll put them into like groups of 3, and then those 3 groups have to somehow find each other and then make their way out. So it is evolving a little bit, the show, in terms of how they're putting people together.
And so this has gotten you to want to be more like the show, and more like the show meaning that you want to learn how to make a fire, not to be running around outside naked.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Jason. I appreciate that.
I was purposely vague.
What people are thinking.
So talk about learning how to make a fire on your own.
Okay, well, I'm a city girl. I'm a city girl, born and bred. I don't have a lot of experience camping or any of that outdoor stuff. Watching the show with my husband, who's a retired military, and his son is current military, and we were talking. I said, geez, I wonder how hard it is to use that flint and get a fire going. And they were like, well, we could try it. And I'm like now? And they're like, yeah, come on. So they, get their flint and fire starter, and we got some lint out of the dryer vent, because apparently that worked really good. And we went outside, and I have to say, within about 5 minutes of them showing me and about 5 minutes of me striking the flint, I made a fire, Jason, and I was very proud of myself and able to cross that off of my bucket lists of things that I wanted to do.
All right, very good. And I just recently did that with my son, who's in Boy Scouts. And so we did cotton balls and petroleum jelly.
Oh, they told me that was also really good. So if I was ever going to go off in the woods by myself, I should try to bring some of that with me.
All right. Well, see, you're just a couple steps away from being on the show then. So is that your next step, to be a member on Naked and Afraid?
No, I'm going to live my life vicariously through the rest of the contestants. Thank you very much. That's good enough for me.
All right, very good. Well, our last segment to the show is Words to the World. And this is where I give the guest the last word. Jenny, you can promote any idea that you wish. What are your words to the world?
Okay, I got a couple here. For those of you that are in this career of analysis, that we all love, make sure that you never stop learning. Okay, so active learning. So whether that means carving out an hour at the end of your Friday to read all of those articles that you send to yourself, or that textbook that you've been, putting on your desk, or whatever it is, I think it's really important for us to realize that our profession is changing rapidly, whether it's software or sources of information or conflicts that are coming up in the world or whatever it is, and we have to stay on top of it. So read, absorb your news whatever way you can, and always keep learning.
Very good. Well, I leave every guest with, you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later. I do appreciate you being on the show, Jenny. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Thank you. See you, everyone.
Hi, this is Jason Elder from LEA Podcasts. I am proud to announce a new law enforcement analysis podcast. ACIA New Horizons podcast from the UK will be hosted by Paige Kenningale. Paige, how we doing?
I'm very well, Jason. How are you?
Very well. Welcome aboard. Tell our audience a little bit about ACIA.
Sure. Okay, so ACIA is an association of crime and intelligence analysts, and it's a community of members from the UK and Ireland, and we encourage all our members to challenge how and why things are done within the intelligence sector.
So what is this podcast going to be about?
So it's going to be topic-based. So we will be speaking with individuals with diverse backgrounds who all work within the intelligence field. It's to provide a support network to improve analyst developments and to create sort of a critical mass to help implement change.
When is this podcast going to be published?
The podcast will be published the first Thursday of every month.
So you will be able to find the ACIA New Horizons podcast on our website. That is www.leapodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcast. And then Paige, one last question. What are your words to the world?
Be open-minded and allow me to network and promote the profession.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcasts.com. Special thanks to the Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.